Hey everyone, welcome to our lecture for Key Concept 2.3, in which we'll be focusing on the Atlantic world. So let's go ahead and read our key concept for today. The increasing political, economic, and cultural exchanges within the Atlantic world had a profound impact on the development of colonial societies in North America. So, translation, we have colonial and European interaction taking place, and African interaction for that matter. And as a result, that's going to have a profound effect on how politically the colonies develop, economically how they develop, and also culturally how they develop. And so that will be our focus for today. So let's take a look at our kind of graphic organizer here that kind of organizes our thoughts for today. But like I said, we want to focus on these interactions that are taking place between Europe, Africa, and the colonies, and we want to focus, like I said, on how the economy, how politics, and how the spreading of ideas changes the colonies over here that will eventually become our country. Okay, so this is kind of how we're going to attack this concept today. Okay, so we're going to start with the economy. Okay, and a lot of this should be review for you guys. I mean, this shouldn't be too mind blowing, but we know that the 13 colonies are part of the British Empire, obviously, and so as a result, they're part of the British economy and their trading network and all that stuff. Okay, so what we see happening in the colonies is that they're part of what has become known as the triangular trade, meaning that there's kind of like a triangle that if you look at the map there, you can kind of see that there's kind of this system that takes place in the colonies. Okay, the colonies primarily, if you look at the notes there, the colonies primarily were for supplying raw materials and supporting other British colonies. For instance, if you look at New England and the Middle colonies, one of their big responsibilities is supplying food for the West Indies and also, the southern colonies like South Carolina and Georgia that are producing valuable cash crops like rice and tobacco and stuff like that. Okay, so we look at these economies that they're shaped by this interaction with Europe. New England, they become big merchants and they take over a lot of the trade that takes place between Great Britain and her colonies. They transport a lot of those materials. New England's not great for farming, but they still can farm, obviously. And so, much of their surplus produce or agricultural goods goes to support the West Indies, to support, obviously, the sugar plantations going on there. We also see New England. As they go to the West Indies, they pick up molasses from some of the French colonies, and they bring that back, and we see in New England a significant rum distillery, production taking place, where we have lots of rum being made. Okay. Also, lots of shipbuilding taking place to support the merchant fleet that does all this trading. The fishing, also cod and mackerel and stuff like that, also helps support the British economies further south. So you can see that New England is very much tied into that British economy. Okay, so yeah, there's an important part there. We talked about the Atlantic slave trade a little bit, but that's part of the triangular trade, and we've already kind of talked about this, so I'm not going to spend any time today on this, but here's just kind of a refresher here where we see the Atlantic slave trade over the course of its existence. Okay, so clearly, interactions with Europe and Africa really kind of shape the colonial economy. They're very much part of that system. Okay, so let's kind of move on to, I guess, politics a little bit here. We do know that because the 13 colonies are such an important part of the British economy, what we see happening is that the British become so happy with their system because they're making so much money off the colonies that they began to ease up on the colonies because everything's going so well. The New England colonies, the Middle colonies, these neo-European colonies are supporting the cash cows of the British Empire, like South Carolina and those West Indies, sugar plantations that they're making so much money that the British are like, you know what, that's really all we care about. And so what we see happening is the British kind of relax their supervision of the colonies. They really don't get too involved, in the day-to-day operations of the colonies. and that is known as salutary neglect. And as a result of that neglect, the British colonies, the 13 colonies, begin to develop this self-government and this sense of independence, where they become used to kind of running their own show. Okay, and that's going to be significant because they're going to develop politicians. They're going to develop people who are very big into political philosophy and people that have a lot of experience, running government. And that's also going to be significant because when the British do try to kind of crack down on the colonies and take over more control, the colonists are going to resent that, and they're not going to want to accept, British control, over their government. So that's kind of a significant part, of this interaction in the Atlantic world, and it also kind of stems off kind of the economic relationship that we see taking place between the colonies and also the mother country. So kind of spinning off that, what we see the British eventually doing is they're starting to crack the whip a little bit with the colonies. Okay, this economic principle known as mercantilism basically exists. If you look at the political cartoon in the lower right, pretty much exists to enrich the mother country. Colonies are there simply to provide raw materials and markets for the mother country's goods and services. Okay, so colonies should provide gold and silver, for instance. Colonies should provide food, and colonies should buy raw materials, and probably most importantly, colonies should also buy the manufactured goods from the mother country. And so what we see taking place throughout the 17th and 18th centuries is the British begin passing laws that basically forbade the colonies from basically manufacturing any of their stuff. The Woolen Act doesn't allow the colonies to produce their own textiles. The Hat Act, believe it or not, forbade hat production. So you had to buy all your hats from the British. The Iron Act forbade the production of metal tools. And so all these things basically kind of keep the colonies in kind of this adolescent kind of stage of their economic development. They're simply providing raw materials to the British. Okay, and also what the British want is the British want to make sure that the colonies are only really trading with the British. And the Molasses Act of 1733 slaps tariffs on French molasses that the colonists used to make rum. And so really, as the British begin to really kind of control the economy and restrict the economic development of the colonies, that's going to start building resentment among the colonists, especially in New England where they rely so much on trade. So real quick, take a second and just pause this, and I want you to basically create a little graphic organizer in your notes. What do you think the effects of mercantilism would be on the colonies? So go ahead and just write a couple sentences answering that question. So pause it right now and please do that. Alrighty, so let's kind of continue on with our last category for the day. We want to focus on ideas. All right, so we want to focus on specifically two big movements, and that is the Enlightenment, which we'll talk about right now, and then in a second we'll focus on the Great Awakening. But what we see happening, and one of the more important things that happens in the British Empire is around 1700, the British government allows free press for really the first time. And with free press, this brings out an explosion of ideas that begin to be shared, within the British Empire, which obviously would include, the 13 colonies. So what we see happening is all these Enlightenment ideas begin to flow across the Atlantic Ocean and into the 13 colonies. And all these Enlightenment ideals are going to start to shape the developments of the 13 colonies, and it's also going to start to make the 13 colonies a little bit more similar because they're all going to start to kind of believe in some of these ideas. Okay, so for instance, John Locke, who you could go ahead and even say is kind of the father of our country, he's the guy that wrote about that all humans have natural rights, life, liberty, and property. Okay, his ideas are going to heavily influence Thomas Jefferson, who writes the Declaration of Independence and actually uses this phrase, in the Declaration of Independence. The only difference is he doesn't put in property and he puts in pursuit of happiness. We're going to see a lot of questioning of religion taking place during this time. Religion had a strong grip on Europe, for the last 300, 400 years, and we're going to see that in America, we are going to see the power of religion taking a little bit of a hit. We're going to see religious toleration become the norm. As a result of some of these ideas, and that can be seen in Maryland with the Toleration Act, with the founding of Pennsylvania. We can see that some of these colonies, in Rhode Island for that matter, are really kind of founded on religious toleration, and even New England, because these Enlightenment ideals, this place where the Puritans kind of settled, even they're going to start to, have religious freedom kind of introduced to their region, and they're going to fight it, obviously, but it's still going to be in there nonetheless. We're also going to see the challenging of religion through the belief of deism. Deism was the belief, and once again, these are the Enlightenment beliefs that were taking place in Europe. But the belief in deism was there's probably a God, but it's really not what humans interpret God to be. Okay, so a lot of our founding fathers in this country were deists, meaning that they believed in a God, but they didn't necessarily believe in the divinity of Jesus Christ. So, for instance, Thomas Jefferson. And if you want to Google this, check it out. But Thomas Jefferson famously created his Jefferson Bible, where he basically crossed out everything that was supernatural, and he eliminated that from his Bible, and he copied and pasted things to create a very secular version of the Bible. Benjamin Franklin also was a deist. Someone who also didn't believe in the divinity of Jesus. Thomas Paine, who wrote Common Sense, also was a deist. In fact, he's got a couple quotes there. The Bible is a book that has been read more and examined less than any book that ever existed. And he went on to say that his mind is his church. And we even see that John Adams and George Washington are sometimes speculated as being people that were deists, if you look at some of their writings later on in their lives. Okay? Now, this is going to have an impact on, the Enlightenment is going to have an impact on our country and how it develops. Many of our great American political philosophers like James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams are going to be heavily influenced by these beliefs. And, when they look to the Constitution, when they write the Declaration of Independence, it's going to be just full of these Enlightenment ideas. Now, the questioning of religion, though, is also going to lead, to kind of a revival of religion in a sense as well. And that kind of leads us to the Great Awakening, which we'll get to in a second. But I want you guys to have a little, I don't know, we'll call it an experiment here, but what I want you guys to do is I want you to pause the video after I'm done explaining this. And I want us to, look at social media and look at how social media spreads ideas and how that can shape, your thoughts and, almost your identity as a person. So obviously the print culture, the spreading of all these ideas through print shaped the colonial, or the American identity in the 13 colonies. I want you guys to go on Twitter, and even if you don't have an account, you can do this. But go to Twitter, and I want you to search the hashtag APUSH, and let's see what we find. And so if you search the hashtag APUSH, you'll see other APUSH students talking about the class. You'll see, our class maybe in the news or people talking about it. I don't know. But basically just search through Twitter. Spend about 5 minutes or so. Search through it, and basically what I want you to do is I want you to answer the prompt, how does this communication impact your thoughts on this class or change the experience you would have in this class? So how could this communication, I should say, impact your thoughts on this class or change the experience you would have in this class? Because this is very similar to, like I said, the printing press. Okay? So let's kind of wrap it up here with the Great Awakening. So the Great Awakening is another very important movement that takes place in America, mainly as a result of, excuse me, the bell's going off. The Great Awakening is another, like I said, movement that takes place that kind of starts in Great Britain and kind of finds its way over to the Americas, and it's got a major impact, on the American colonies. Okay, so what kind of causes the Great Awakening? Well, people are kind of upset about deism. This idea that Jesus is not the it's not God. I mean, that kind of irritates people, so people are going to kind of react to that. We also have this this movement that emphasizes pious behavior that kind of starts in Germany, and that's going to kind of influence this Great Awakening as Germans immigrate to the United States. They're going to kind of bring these new religious thoughts over here. Also, we see a loss of religious zeal, in New England especially, and that's going to be something that is going to lead to the Great Awakening. So the effects of the Great Awakening, what we see going on here, is religion's becoming a hot topic of discussion. Books are being written about religion. There's newspapers, there's magazines. All these people are talking about religion. Okay, and so this is kind of pumping up the religious zeal in America once again. Obviously, there are some parts of this country that were founded on religion, but after a while, that kind of loses steam. Okay, and that's kind of shown in New England with the old lights versus the new lights. The old lights being the old school Puritans, the new lights being, the people that have some of these new ideas. And so in this Great Awakening, we also start to see, the Puritans are starting to lose control to the younger generations. We see separatist churches popping up that don't believe in the old school Puritan ways. All right, and we see the downfall of the Puritan state-sponsored churches, and we see the establishment of a separation of church and state, all because of this religious movement that is taking place. And we also start to see a much more diverse, religious experience taking place in America. And I know that might be a little hard to see in the lower right-hand corner, but you can see all the different types of Christian congregations, or denominations, I should say, popping up. So that in 1700, you can see that there's not too much diversity in America, but by 1740, we see denominations growing, like the Baptist and Congregational and Dutch Reformed. We see all these different ones growing, Presbyterian. So by 1780, we can see there's been a significant change in the religious landscape, in America. So that's an important effect of this interaction taking place in the Atlantic, is the spreading of religious ideas, and that has obviously an impact on America as well. Alrighty, so once again, here's kind of summing up what we talked about here. So we're going to go ahead and stop right there. If you have any questions, email me and let me know. Thanks, guys.